Balaji is a television production company. It's India's largest television production company and one of the top 5 movie studios. Currently, we're doing a lot of shows on air. We have 8 shows on air and many more coming. So when a content company like us looks at India and the market, we see a lot of headroom in the television space because there's a long way to go. We are like 50% digitized, so that's a lot more homes that have got to be digitized. India is heavily under-screened from a movie point of view. I think we've got 8 screens per million as compared to the US, which has 123 screens per million. The 800 million new mobile screens, which are dumb for the most part, will soon become smart. Right. And they have wallets in place. So from our scheme of things as a content company, we think that it's a huge opportunity to create content. And I mean, all the sessions here, we've heard about creating more compelling content, creating bigger, brighter, better content and getting it to consumers. So, I mean, I think that's what's new in India. The fact that all of this direct-to-consumer opportunity is growing so fast.
And just before we move on, I mean, that's great, but we also know that ARPUs are very low, that actually, despite the volumes, I mean, there's still not that much money in the system, right?
Well, actually, it's not true. India, the consumer is spending. What is happening, however, is that the method of getting that money from him is still, that's the challenge.
But so the consumer is spending, but you're not getting as much as you want.
So exactly.
Well, you wouldn't be the first person to have said that. So, MIPCOM. Okay. Moving on. What's new?
I think we are a country with 800 television channels. In spite of all that, I think we are still an evolving market. Okay? And we are still at the early stages of our growth. Like Samir just mentioned, today we don't get a fair share of subscription revenue. That's not there. Advertising, India is still one of the lowest in terms of GDP. Advertising to GDP, we are still one of the lowest. I think that boom hasn't happened. And one of the things which I feel the opportunities that are there are a few production houses who come in, like Endemol is a good one, and there are a few others. I think there's a huge opportunity because one of the things that's happening right now is production companies or companies like Balaji don't invest. It is the broadcaster who's investing, and only we have a skin in the game, nobody else. The risk is all ours. And that's where we believe that if there are partners who are willing to co-produce with us, then we can take bigger gambles. We are the channel who produced 24 in India.
Right.
Okay? And when I went to my board, a show costs you about 10 lakh rupees, and we were producing a show costing 15 times that amount in the same market. I mean, difficult to do because you're taking a huge risk.
Right.
But if you had a partner who also said, I'm willing to partner with you in this, I think that will take the scale of production levels high. I feel very sad for the money that we spend, the kind of content that we create, I think is fantastic. The second thing is we haven't really leveraged the other platforms. Today India is a demographic of India is more than 50% of India's population is below 25 years old, and they watch television or they consume content, let me put it that way, on different screens, and I'm sure it's happening everywhere in the world. Today you have DTH operators offering you TV everywhere. So all this is happening. What hasn't happened is we haven't found a methodology, or we haven't been able to find a way of monetizing everything that we're doing. And I think that change, it will happen, and when it happens, it's going to happen very fast.
But what will make it happen? What's that moment at which?
I think one of the biggest problems we have is we have about 950 million handsets in our country, but only 100 million is smartphones.
Right.
The biggest problem that I think exists at this moment is broadband, is connectivity, which still doesn't exist. Even in a city like Mumbai, it's an issue. Now there is Reliance is one company which is hopefully, I'm told by next year they'll be launching 4G. And if the experience of watching on different handsets becomes real time, I think that will be the game changer for the industry.
And the device will be the payment platform.
Pardon?
And the mobile device will become the payment platform.
Yes, it will, because it already exists, and probably Rajat can give us a lot of work in that area. You should be able to throw some light. Absolutely.
So before we come to you, maybe just talk. I want to pick up this young youth piece, okay? Rather large youth piece. So I mean, we heard from that in the previous session the importance of youth in driving what was happening in China. You've introduced the importance of this sector in India. As an online expert, how, and particularly when you look around the world at what's happening online, how would you compare what's happening today online in India vis-a-vis some of the other markets that you tend to talk about?
So, one very unique thing about India as a market is traditional media and online play is very strong. So, it will open up opportunities. For example, it's the time that India will go global. I see data at YouTube, for example, for some of the top production houses. And they're getting watch time from territories which are normally not on the radar for top studios. Example could be Germany, which is getting 7 to 10 million watch minutes every quarter on a channel from Bollywood.
From Bollywood.
Not all Indian content, just a channel, leading, not just one.
Okay. And to what degree, I mean, the online ad spend is still very low in India, right? I mean, it's low anyway, and I'll come back to your point around why is it so low. But the online proportion is ridiculously a smidgen, right? So, but if one was to look at the revenues that are online, that do go online, and that are related to video, how much of that is sort of local content versus overseas content?
So India locally consumes a lot of locally produced content, but I think at least easily about 30% to 40% is not made in India. That's a huge chunk. And what will happen is increasingly technology will solve a lot of these media problems. Because one of the trends that I'm seeing, and we can talk about it, is micro communities being empowered and being developed with technology, which will enable a niche content producer or a broadcaster to be able to tap into the right community and get S1 revenues or T1 revenues. It will be much easier very near in the future. Like next 12 months to 18 months will be very interesting.
I just want to come back to this overall ad market because a comment that you quite rightly pointed out that as a proportion of GDP, the proportion that goes to advertising in India is still one of the lowest in the world. Now, it grows at about 10% a year, but why is, given everything that's happening in the economy, why isn't it growing more than that?
I think it's for two reasons. One of the main reasons is too much of fragmentation. The TRA has just come out with the regulation which is still being debated in court, but for the first time, I think we will have a regulation which will cap the advertising time on television to start with for pay TV. Once that happens, I think the supply-demand ratio will change because right now there is so much of supply and there is demand, but the supply, it's in any business, right? So I believe once that is done, the yield will go up because the demand will go up. And I think one way of growing the business, you have to have 3 layers where you may have the free-to-air channels who will be carrying advertising with no limitations. You will have pay channels which will have 10 or 12 minutes of advertising, and probably a premium channel which will have no advertising at all. I think all models will coexist, and that will drive the yield up. Because I've been in this industry for almost 24 years now, and actually the yield has come down. Television penetration has gone up. The advertising rates haven't gone up in that term.
Yeah. And that's that supply issue.
It's huge.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of skipped over you, not sort of with any ill intent. Really, right. I think one of the other aspects that we're seeing is obviously looking at the other side of the equation, which I think is something that you've seen. So, what are you seeing that's new right now?
Marcel, I'm very convinced that India is at the cusp of a digital revolution. It's already here. If you're getting into India right now, you're late. For me, the single largest opportunity is the ability to reach a global audience via the internet, particularly the mobile internet. For me, that is a game changer. What we've also learned, because we've moved from traditional to digital, is that you can't apply traditional media rules to digital. Now hold that thought and combine that thought with India's 5,000-year-old heritage. Indian mythology. India has always been a land of storytellers. And Bollywood, which is India's pop culture. Combine these two thoughts with short-form programming for a digital audience, which we can produce, which we are producing in India in English. And now my company is localizing that in international languages like Japanese and Arabic and Spanish. So I really think that the combination of these three ideas, the ability to reach a global audience via the internet, taking India's 5,000-year-old heritage and producing short-form digital programming in English and multiple international languages is an unbeatable combination. This is a new business strategy from India.
But I'm going to ask you, if I may, actually the same question I asked Charles earlier on, which is around what are we seeing in terms of multi-channel networks, user-generated content. What are we seeing, if I can ask you, in that area in India right now?
We've seen tremendous growth. It's been mind-boggling. In India, the YouTube journey started with not very different from Zoho, when they took in traditional media content and distributed to audiences who were moving away from traditional streams. But over the last 1.5 years, I see so many new UGC channels that have come up producing really high quality content on comedy. You talk about comedy, doing really, really well. Food, Rajat talked about food, extremely popular. I've seen so many new channels come around, music talent, news bloggers, technology bloggers, using video to reach their fans.
So who's going to be aggregating this?
See, I have a slightly contradictory view in the
I
sense
hope you would.
because I was not here yesterday, but I believe my ex-boss James no doubt mentioned YouTube. I see YouTube as the biggest competitor to broadcast. Okay, we have one of the most popular shows in India called Comedy Nights with Kapil. It's broken all records. It's the highest rated television show in India.
Yeah.
And as of last month, I've just taken it off YouTube, and I said I'm not going to give that content to YouTube. This season of Big Brother, we don't have it on YouTube. We have a contract, so we have to do the next number of hours of content a month. We do that. Also, another thing is, whilst I am a big believer in the digital media, and I believe that that is the future, I think it's going to coexist with television and then grow parallelly. A lot of stuff that you are doing, some of our content is being syndicated everywhere in the world. There are a lot of short formats that we are looking at. The problem is, unless the distribution mechanism, the broadband is not addressed, monetization is a huge problem. I mean, it makes very nice thing to say 40% of YouTube's revenue in India comes from original content. But what is original content? I mean, if you look at the money, I think YouTube in India does about 500, 600, I don't know the exact figure, 700 crore of rupees. I mean, television is a 7,000 crore industry. So the numbers are small, and that will not grow until and unless the bandwidth issues are addressed. And two, everybody makes these huge statements. I mean, this morning I was listening to somebody and they said, oh, Unilever is spending 35% of their budget for 2 brands on the internet. What's the total? They take 2 of their not so smallest budget brands, and then it's a nice KRA, nice stick to do platform and say 35% of my budget is being spent on it. The truth is, it is still very small.
Right.
And I don't think anybody has really mastered the art of monetization. If I produce a content and if I get 1 million views on YouTube, 1 million is a huge number. At the end of the day, how much do we make? 50,000 rupees. 50,000 rupees. And that's ridiculous. I'm spending 5 lakhs or 50 lakhs to do the same content. And I think that arithmetic or that monetization formula has still not been worked out, at least in India for sure. Not to say that it will not happen, it will happen. I think there is a phase, but once broadband and connectivity issues are addressed, I think all this will fall in place and will fall in place very quickly. And the 4G that we are all hoping for, which it's been in the pipeline for quite some time now, but indications are it will roll out next year or end of this year, whatever the time frame is. I think that will be a game changer.
So, I mean, you want to come back on that as well? You've
I
got a
just
big
want-
grin on your face, so you want to say something, I know.
No, so I genuinely have a vision where technology is going to enable and help grow the market. You hear a lot of things about, even on television side, there's so much of under penetration. Who's going to go out and educate? What Raj talked about is a windowing issue. At what time you release to which platform is completely in content owner's control. Even today. I think he's right about the fact that we are all learning here, we are all experimenting here. There's no established best practice. We find something that's working, then another 50 million audiences get added up, right? And it changes the pattern of consumption and behavior, right? When I started at YouTube just 4 years ago, right, there was a single-digit million users. Now, I know we're sitting in Europe and single-digit million could be a lot for some markets, but for India, it's really nothing given our tools where they are. And today there are more than 60 million users just on PC. If you take estimates into account on people who access only on mobile, that number could be as high as 80 to 100 million, right? Now, obviously the patterns of viewership that were working earlier are not working today. Access is coming. Smart devices are going to really explode. We are at about 100 million.
I mentioned at the very beginning, obviously, there is a change of government, a new government. I think for most of us that have been doing business in India or trying to do business in India, regulation and government has always been an interesting dilemma. But as for executives from India, if you were advising, Prime Minister Modi and his new government on what they should be doing to really, help the industry develop, what would be the one thing what would be your advice?
Actually, from a content point of view, in many ways the regulation already exists and it's beneficial to the whole content industry because our Prime Minister recently said in a speech famously that come make in India, inviting the world to come into India to make. So while of course Indian producers are creating a lot of content, it was an open invitation to everyone to come and make in India. He was of course talking to the defense industry, but I can apply that much to entertainment and to any form of content. So, that already exists and that's a really big opportunity. Producers in India are not partnering with broadcasters and therefore sharing the risk. That is something that we are looking at very seriously and in fact encourage everyone else to do that, because if there is a risk reward mechanism, everyone can benefit. Currently the industry is very stymied in that sense. So from a regulatory point of view for content creation, it is an open field.
Right.
I think the new Prime Minister is very tech savvy. He ran his own campaign on Twitter and he's very active on it. And the way he's going about it, I think before we have power in all our villages, we'll have broadband for sure. But one thing which I think, if you tell me I should ask him, would be to release spectrum. The last thing which I think we started the process but we've gone back and forth is I think we need to have the complete implementation of the digitization process, because until that happens, that's another revenue stream that there's so much of leakages and broadcasters don't make any money. In fact, it's become worse. We we got almost a 20% benefit a year ago, but now it's seeming like it's going away back to square one, and that's a dangerous trend.
Okay, so release spectrum and get on with digitization. Okay, clear messages. Narendra, anything that you want?
To advise the Prime Minister?
Yeah.
As Raj said, he's extremely tech savvy. So the advice would be to wire up India as quickly as possible and to encourage Indian entrepreneurs to have a global outlook and have a global vision, rather than being restricted to the Indian audience alone, whether it's in India or it's in the diaspora. So I think we have to break out of that and appeal to an audience much beyond the Indian audience.
Samir, would you agree with that?
No, I genuinely think that, all content will coexist. I mean, it's got into this, very competitive kind of thing, as in, it's almost as if online is going to replace television and television is going to replace film.
Absolutely.
Nothing of the kind is going to happen. Audiences expect more. We've heard this, that they want bigger, better, brighter stuff. All kinds of things will happen. Short form will exist. A housewife in Japan listening to Baba Black Sheep is good. And you will still make Marco Polo, and you will do Game of Thrones and House of Cards. So all of that will happen. I just think that the opportunity is so good right now, because there are, with all the devices, all the connectivity, with all the consumers, and all of them willing to pay and having such higher expectation, it's a great time to be in this business, because there's so much opportunity to do new things. And you will do long form and short form and cultural stuff and, all kinds of things. One of the most successful shows, an earlier session in India, is that Amir Khan's Satyamev Jayate. That's serious programming, but it's on mainline television and it does very well. So, that's the opportunity, and I think that's where, we'd welcome more partnership, more collaboration, more investment. It's not a competition. I don't think it's competitive.
Amit, advice for the PM?
What I'm really excited about is the amount of innovation that's about to start and kick off. If you look at the amount of new things that each one of these gentlemen have done in the last 3 months and are planning for next 6 months, some of which I'm privy to, you have an incredible amount of possibilities. So what Prime Minister would do best is to remove more hurdles one at a time. I think we need to have a bigger interest development globally into Indian content economy. Make in India is definitely here already. Out of all the YouTube Indian content that we produced, more than 70% of revenues and eyeballs came from global viewership. So that's just a pointer, and they were consuming the content produced for traditional medium as well as the Baba Black Sheeps, which are very universal and appeal. And therefore Indian cultural content, Bollywood, etc. is also getting more global and appeal. So I would encourage that visibility to step up. I don't think we've done a great job to market ourselves and make people just aware of the
When you say you mean you as an Indian, as a country?
Yes, because we're advising the Prime Minister.
Yeah. So you'd say to him, go out, progressively deregulate.
In fact, the current Prime Minister that we have is probably one of the most dynamic, most progressive, most tech-savvy Prime Minister the country has, and he's also very industry-friendly. So I think the next 5 years is going to define a lot of things for India.
We've talked a bit about consumer behavior, adopting devices, but actually it's still a relatively small part. The 100 million enabled mobile devices as distinct from the 850 sort of dumb devices. What are you really seeing in terms of consumer behavior, in terms of urban versus sort of rural in particular? Are you seeing significant shifts? We're seeing significant shifts obviously in China, but are you seeing those sorts of shifts in India right now?
We're seeing a lot of consumption on handheld devices. So when we began, there were about 10% of our views were on handheld. Today it's almost 50-50. And that number is much higher in India versus the rest of the world. In India, that number is much higher in tier 2 and 3 cities.
Right.
So I really think that India's next billion people will access the internet on the mobile phone. They will not know what the PC is. India is a mobile first country.
Yeah.
And that's something which we have to understand. What we also need to understand is that 95+% of India's mobile consumers are on a prepaid plan, which means that my wallet is in the operator's pocket, which also allows him to bill in terms of microtransactions very easily. So he can keep deducting 1 rupee from my account, and I pretty much can't do anything, because India is largely a prepaid market. This is something which is very unique to India, in my opinion.
And to add to what he said is one reason why that happened is for mobile you don't need electricity. Even if there is no power, you will be able to consume. And you have 160 million households, and we are largely a single television household even today, more than 92%. but 900 million and expected to go to 1.3 or 1.5 billion handsets in the next 2 or 3 years. So the explosion is happening. And like I said, because power will take a long time to be addressed, but if you have internet, you can consume content on your phone, and it's happening. In fact, music is being consumed big time on handphones today.
When you talk about a consumer and an evolution point of view, what's also happened in the last 10, 15 years is that, we've added a whole new TV population, with whole new mobile population, and a lot of the younger people who are coming into the audience fold now have grown past what TV was originally. I put Millionaire on air in the year 2000. In the year 2014, it's still on air. Right? It does pretty well in India. I was speaking to the programming head from Sony, where it is, and he was telling me that when people down the first time, there used to be a lot of excitement when the question was asked, and then you have the hold and the pause and the drama for the answer. But today, when the show comes on air and the question is asked, before the anchor can ask the question, you've already Googled the answer, right? And that kills millions. So, that's the way audiences are changing, and what's happening is that we are, like television, is programming for newer audiences who are still coming into the fold, which are still, more basic, more, sort of household drama. And there is a breed of, audience that has lived through all this and are now looking for more. So that differential in mainstream cinema, in television, in online, there's a huge, there's a very popular channel called Star World Premiere, which essentially shows us US shows 1 week after their US premiere, which is pay and premium and all of that, but there's an audience for it. So I think the audience is sort of evolving in that manner, and it will segment more. There will be more niche entertainment channels, a lot of younger programming, designed to target audiences. I think a lot more of that will happen.
So there will, going back to the supply and demand issue, so there will be more channels, more niche channels. So currently there are 800 odd channels in India?
Out of which almost 400 are news channels.
Yes, you should keep them aside and then take the count forward.
Right.
I think there will also be a consolidation that will happen. There will be a shakeup. It may take a little longer time, but it is going to happen. And I think people with deep pockets, large networks will sustain. There are small independent ones who are the long tail at the moment, unless they are very genre specific or they have some kind of specialization, they will perish. It's already becoming very difficult.
Right. So shake out, but new things coming along.
Yeah, but it's typically at an industry level. I think the industry is going forward. There will be individuals and companies that may fall by the wayside for inefficiency or lack of capital. But fundamentally, the audience is segmenting. We are doing more programming. We will continue to do bigger programming. We'll make bigger movies. We'll do more online content. We will do all of those things. There is retail money out there. We have examples of consumers going for IPL matches, going and seeing movies in theatre where they spend 1,000, 2,000 rupees, and then yet they crib to pay 250 rupees a month for 800 channel, world-class television offering. So the money is out there, and it's just a question of getting that. And it's close. I think it'll happen all of a sudden, as everyone else is saying here. The minute the connectivity falls in place. And the other thing about India, just one, because I know we've been hearing the digitization story and the connectivity story for a long time now, is that India sort of succeeds in spite of itself. So you have to have a slightly more sort of evolved view to it. That if you look at 20 years back where we were to now. Anybody 20 years back, if they thought that India would have 800 channels and 150 million homes and 800 mobile phones, would be thinking they're smoking something. I think it will follow this.
Consumer behavior changes. You're at the cusp of many of those changes. Anything you particularly want to highlight?
So I think while Raj talks about shakeout, that happens in any industry you want, right? But what's very unique is, given OTT, the way it's happening in India, and the seeds of what's coming, even before a mobile access is solved, that's going to allow more avenues for people to monetize niche content and to be able to do it very profitably. You also started out talking about rural versus urban divide. Actually, that doesn't exist in reality. In reality, what exists in every metropolitan city, you've got both urban, both rural, and you've got these, I go back to, repeat myself, micro communities. right? So they exist, they have their own consumption habits. And if you go to places where you monitor better, so inside my own household, you will find my 3-year-old consumption habits very different from my mother's consumption habits, right? And they might be using the same device, but content might change, right? And that's the reality today. So niches are going to get addressed through OTT, through digitization of cable, through a lot of technology that's yet to come in the application ecosystem. More and more video platforms will become profitable as a result of this evolution. So I see that as a trend that we're going to all fall into place because of this enablement thanks to digitization. And timing can never be better. And I'm really excited about what I see coming in next 12 months.
Excitement, good word. Excited, guys? Are you all excited?
Sure. Best time.
Absolutely.
Invest in India.
This is the time.
Okay. So you've given the message, right? Best time, invest in India.
And you're seeing that we are all putting our money where our mouth is. It's not that we are preaching something in practice, but all of us are doing
And
it.
I think there are a lot of people also in India who are willing to match dollar to dollar to partner. So it's not about just investing. I mean, it's not just about bringing foreign money in. I think there's an opportunity. We are an opportunity to match dollar to dollar, so that we put our money where our mouth is and we build together. So I mean, this is an opportunity. And
So that goes back to open for business. It's a great time. Advice, though. So you're advising the people that you're hoping to attract. When they look at recent developments, because you're talking about exciting, but one is always a legacy of what's happened over the last 2 to 3 years. So digitalization taking a long time, maybe over-regulated. What's your advice to people coming into the market, other please give you money? What advice would you have for organizations looking at the Indian market right now? What's the most important thing they should do?
From my scheme of things, I think it's important to be patient. It is a market that we are still at the ground floor. There is a scope to build. Otherwise, you come in later and buy at a premium. So there's an opportunity here to build. There's an opportunity to partner. And you have to be patient. Yes, it is a bit of it feels a bit of a struggle. But honestly, it's no different from many other parts of the world. In fact, I think India is more democratic, more free, more open in many ways. And it's just that. Be patient, and it's changing. It's getting there.
Okay, it's changing. Be patient.
Yeah, I think Samir summed it up quite well. And you look at success stories of Star, of Sony, of Viacom, Disney, all the people who came in early are reaping the benefit of it. They're all doing extremely well. And I think, like I said, people who come in today, you're at the ground floor, so you'll be able to get it. Come in at a very less entry price, but later you may have to come and buy and pay 10 times more for the same thing.
Roger?
To me, it's very simple. Focus on the mobile internet. That is really where the opportunity is. More than the desktop internet. And I'm talking more digital now rather than traditional media. I wear both hats. We produce films and TV shows, so I completely understand what my friends here are saying. But as a digital entrepreneur, I really would want people, the audience, to focus on the mobile internet in India. That's where the action is, especially with the launch of 4G LTE around the corner.
I just want to advise people globally that it's never been a better environment to be in India. If you look at the top studios in US or some of the other ones, they've already invested in it. They already have a place. The torso ecosystem has not really started moving to India in a big way. I think the environment is really bang on, spot on to be able to do that. Where else would you find a market where you can address hundreds of millions of consumers? Where broadcast is at minimum double up in the next 4 to 5 years. It's going to be a mega industry. Online video, digital will probably go 10x and still remain very small for us. I understand because the base is so tiny. But where else do you have such ecosystem out there where you have an opportunity to create something really transformational? And the timing couldn't be better. So that's what my advice is.
Okay, very clear, gentlemen. Good advice. good advice for the PM as well. So I'd like to thank you all for contributing your thoughts this afternoon. And I'd like to ask the audience to, in the usual way, to thank our panelists.